Let's try and make sense of why would a helicopter like a Bell 212 crash. A lot of questions are being asked, and joining me now for more on the story is Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, former Chief of Air Staff, a very accomplished helicopter pilot and somebody who's flown in the Tabriz area of Azerbaijan and Iran. Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, welcome on India Today, sir. What do you make of these developments? 3 helicopters took off, one carrying President Raisi crashed. Some argue if it was just bad weather, all 3 helicopters should have encountered that bad weather. What explains one crashing and the other 2 landing safely, sir?
Yes, very, very strange, because for a VVIP like the President of Iran, if there are 3 helicopters, those 3 helicopters are normally, I don't know what protocol they follow, but normally these are basically to be in close contact with each other all through the flight. Secondly, of course, they carry other, security, etc. That's a different issue. But but I don't know. I'm not very sure if all 3 took off together, or there was it was a spaced takeoff of a few minutes each.
Okay.
If that is clear, then probably we can shed a little more light on what could have happened.
Okay.
I don't think I have seen anywhere as to what the sequence of takeoff was, because normally for a VVIP mission like this, all 3 take off one after the other, so that eventually in the air and at the destination, you don't know in which helicopter the VVIP is.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Sir, could it be possible that the other 2 helicopters perhaps somehow dodged the bad weather and only the presidential chopper was caught in it? And anyways, aren't the 3 helicopters in communication with each other or with ground with the ATC? And sir, do you find that strange that the helicopter carrying officials and security detail, that those helicopters landed safely, but the one carrying the president and the foreign minister crashed?
It is quite likely if they were not in contact with each other, because if they were in contact with each other, then the lead helicopter, whichever it was, we don't know what sequence. You said 1 and 3 landed safely, and he was number 2. Have I got it right?
So, there's a little lack of clarity on this, but perhaps.
Okay, whichever way it is, when 3, if they're in contact, I'm quite sure that each one will pass the weather on to the other, and just one helicopter will not enter that bad weather. Unless,
Right.
of course, the president's aircraft was the lead aircraft, and it inadvertently entered weather and probably resulted in this accident. And the other 2 avoided that patch and landed safely. That could be one possibility. But Gaurav, you see, from what I saw in the TV clips, etc., the weather appeared to be pretty bad.
Yes.
The visibility was almost 0, because when you saw some vehicles moving, even they could hardly see anything ahead of them. So in that kind of weather, I would say not safe, but quite with a high degree of surety that this accident could have been the result of bad weather. But this is just speculation, because we do not have the details.
Oh, absolutely. Though a probe has been ordered, Iran's former foreign minister has blamed the US sanctions regime for this crash. They say that the US-made Bell 212 helicopter was flying without proper maintenance and spares because of sanctions, and these are helicopters that have been with Iran for close to 4 decades, if not more. What do you make of this assertion? Could, in your view, some external agency, as some argue perhaps Mossad, could they have had a role to play?
That is quite likely. That is quite likely, because if you see the vintage of this 212, it's quite an ancient helicopter. The original version of this helicopter, called the UE, I think it was called the UH-1 UE, was used in Vietnam. Now we are going back into the early 60s, and after that, if I am not mistaken, the 212, in which the helicopter involved in this accident, I think, was a twin engine which came into service around, I think, in the very late 60s or early 70s, I think.
Yes.
And it's a very, very widely used helicopter all around the world. But yes, the sanctions with no spares, and the very reason that they were flying such an ancient helicopter for the president of the country would obviously point to the fact that these sanctions had hit them badly and they couldn't get helicopters from any other Western country. But what I'm surprised is, I think
The Russian.
the Iranians have a lot of Russian equipment,
Yes.
and as to why they were not using Russian helicopters for this VVIP flights, I don't know.
And sir, does a 70s vintage helicopter have an electronic warfare or countermeasure systems on board? Or if they don't have spares, if they're unable to maintain these helicopters, they can't think of upgrades, or can they, sir?
I doubt it very much. I doubt it very, very much because given the vintage of this helicopter, I don't think it was equipped with any of these countermeasures to start with, unless, of course, the Iranians halfway through uh, modified the helicopter for these. But you see, a helicopter should have scope for modification. And I don't know if the Bell 212 had that scope, and if it was, wired and geared to take in such kind of sophisticated electronic modifications. It's doubtful, but you see, I mean, it goes back to the very old saying. I mean, if it is the cause of the accident is weather, that a helicopter, mountains, and clouds or bad visibility cannot exist together. One of these things has to be missing.
Yes.
And given the weather, and I've actually many years back landed in Tabriz,
Yes.
and I know that place is very mountainous, and on both sides, within Iran also, and towards the border with Azerbaijan, it's a very hilly terrain, and if this kind of weather was persisting there, it is quite likely that bad weather could be the cause. But as you
Fair
said,
enough.
it could be anything else. It could be a technical failure. It could be a shoot down from the ground. But in that kind of weather, man portable missile getting that aircraft is also quite unlikely. But as I said, there could be any reason till a little more details come out. And I don't think the world is going to be privy to very much of details which will emanate from that country. I mean,
Well,
that's my personal opinion.
Well, we track that story very closely. Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major, many thanks for joining me here on India Today. Always a privilege having you on the broadcast.